Hello, welcome to Midweek Boost. If you remember last week, I asked you to pray for my friend Ann Revis, who has been suffering with the COVID virus. I'm happy to report that she's doing much better. She's still weak, but is making progress each day. Thank you for your prayers. Today I'm going to speak on the topic of when you are criticized. Our text comes from the Gospel of John, the 9th chapter, verses 1 through 16. This is what it says. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming, when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed, and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed that he was. Others said, No, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am the man. How then were your eyes opened, they asked. He replied, The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go wash in the pool, and so I went and washed, and then I could see. Where is this man? They asked him. I don't know, he said. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. And so ends this reading from the Gospel. Somebody once said that there are no hard and fast rules to life, only hard ones. One of those hard rules we learn is that you cannot please everybody. We can try, but somebody is going to be unhappy. Even Jesus could not succeed at that. There was always someone looking over his shoulder with a critical eye. Even when he healed this man who had been blind from birth, it got him into trouble, for he did this act of healing on the Sabbath. To be human is to be criticized by somebody, somewhere, under certain circumstances. We might as well accept that fact. And we need to deal with the fact that sometimes we're all on the other side of the fence. We're the ones tempted to offer hurtful criticism. You hear somebody say, Now, I don't mean to criticize, but, and here the floodgates open and a torrent is unleashed. Perhaps it would be good for us to deal today with the question of how to handle criticism. Since it's so universal and since criticism is potentially so hurtful, I think it'd be worth a few minutes of our time to deal with this age-old problem. Let's begin by acknowledging the universality of the critical spirit. Every good person or good movement has generated controversy. Did you know that when they first started vaccinating children against smallpox, there was a movement? That's hard for us to believe, considering how many millions of lives vaccinations have saved. But it's true. It's equally hard for us to believe that when the first doctor suggested that physicians wash their hands before delivering babies in order to prevent infectious diseases, he was almost torn to pieces. It's hard for us to believe that Bach was considered a heretic because of his style of performance, or that Shakespeare was considered a trivial playwright in his day because he was too popular. Name any outstanding public figure in our land today, and you can find somebody who thinks he's a saint and another who thinks he's a scoundrel. It's always been that way, and I guess it always will be. This brings to the second thing that needs to be said about criticism. It often means that you're on the right track. Rarely do we hear someone being criticized for doing nothing. It was Harry Truman who said, "If you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen." But I'm thankful for those people who do enter the kitchen of service and stay there in spite of intense heat. Most of us are not like Harry. Somehow he had toughened himself. He made some tremendously unpopular decisions, but he had the strength of character to see them through. We're thankful for him, but many of us are much more sensitive to criticism than he was. The barbs hurled our way hurt us more than we can say. It's difficult to keep our eyes fixed upon our objective under such circumstances. I guess nothing disturbs a pastor more than to ask someone to do a difficult job in the church and then to hear that person needlessly criticized over some petty concern that somebody has. So I was always thankful when I found a person who said, "Hey, I'm here to serve God. I'm doing the best I can, and I will continue to serve God as long as this church will allow me that privilege." Thank God for people like that. And I'm sure there are people like that in every church. And thank God for you who encourage rather than discourage. We can get mired down in pettiness in the church, just as the Pharisees did, and neglect our main business. But remember, criticism can sometimes mean that you're on the right track. There's a third thing we need to see about criticism, and that is it's a great revealer of character. How big of a man or woman are you? As John D. Murphy expressed it in an article in Your Life magazine, he said, "You have to be little to be little." How pathetic it is to hear someone try to build himself or herself up by putting someone else down. Indeed, one of the most obvious of the defense mechanisms that the human mind employs is this one: the less you think of yourself, the harder you are on others. That's why Jesus was so accepting, so compassionate with everyone he met. He was secure in who he was. Great people are not threatened by the accomplishments of others. They're not easily offended. They do not feel easily slighted. The story is told of a private in World War I who shouted, "Put out that match," only to find that the offender had been General Blackjack Pershing. When he tried to stammer out his apology, General Pershing patted him on the back and said, "That's all right, son. Just be glad I'm not a second lieutenant." The point should be clear. A general is more secure within himself than a second lieutenant. Criticism is a great revealer of character, both of the person offering the criticism as well as the person on the receiving end. As someone once put it, throwing mud at a good man only soils your own hands. There's another thing to be said about our critics, though. sometimes we ought to listen to them. In the traditional list of the 7 deadly sins, pride has always led the list. A proud man refuses to listen to his critics, and that's a dangerous mistake to make. Sometimes what seems to be idle criticism is really a courageous warning. Somebody has cared enough to dare to help us see the folly of our ways. It takes a mature man or woman to sift out negative remarks and to profit from criticism that is constructive. Henry Bosch, writing in Our Daily Bread, says, "A successful Christian is one who, by the grace of God, can lay a firm foundation for a better life with the bricks that others throw at him." That's good. And there's one final thing to be said. Let the criticism of others teach you compassion, for you might be tempted to criticize also. You know, we're all in this thing together. We're all sinners saved by grace. I like the little story of the day a medieval peasant met a monk on the road, and he asked, what do you holy men do up there in the monastery so close to God? Now, the monk was full both of honesty and humility. And he answered, "What do we holy men do up in the monastery? I tell you what we do. We fall down and we get up. We fall down and we get up. We fall down and we get up." Isn't that the story, though, of every man and woman who has ever lived upon this earth? We fall down and we get up. We fall down and we get up. None of us has arrived. None of us are perfect. So let us be encouragers of one another. In this story of the blind man, there are 2 instances of a negative sort. In the first one, the disciples passed judgment on this poor blind man. "Who sinned, Lord?" they asked Jesus, "this man or his parents that he should be blind?" That's a convenient way of avoiding involvement with people's needs. Later, the Pharisees are angered because Jesus healed this man on the Sabbath. But at the center of the picture is Jesus caring enough to see this man's need and to bring him healing, whatever the consequences. That's the model you and I would choose for our lives, isn't it? Building people up rather than tearing them down. Showing compassion for others in response to God's compassion for us. That's the right way, isn't it? Thanks for watching today. I hope you have a good week, and may the Lord bless you and keep you and give you peace. Amen.